So good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. So I wanted to kind of check in and see what you guys did this past week or two. I apologize, I couldn't make the connection last week. But just kind of get a sense for where you guys are at with the bill tracking. And then I wanted to walk through the legislative cutoff calendar, which I think is a helpful tool to kind of understand how the process works in terms of how bills move through the process. Does that sound good? And then if you guys, whatever questions you guys have.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. So give me a sense of what you guys have been up to in terms of looking at the bills and understanding the issues and all of that jazz.
So what did we do last week?
Last week we talked about three of the bills. It was the breakfast after the bell, lead pipes, and suspensions.
Cool. And were you able to get on the bill page on the Washington Legislative website to kind of look at those resources at all?
Oh, yeah, or Miss Little printed the bills for us.
Okay, great. So you printed off the language of the bills?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Were you able to see the bill summary at all or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Maybe just to jump into, would it work for you guys if I just walk you through the bill tracking so we can kind of give you a sense of what the timeline is, and then I can take you to the bill page and just show you some other resources that are there?
That would work.
Okay. So let's bring up the cutoff calendar first. And the cutoff calendar is a resource that we all use, lobbyists, legislators, and it really guides the process of the work that we do down here in terms of how we move bills through. So David is pulling this up right now.
Yes.
And just to remind you guys, so there's every other year, there's a long session and then a short session. And so on the odd numbered years, so 2015, 2017 being odd years, we have what are called long sessions. And those are 105-day sessions, as opposed to the short sessions, which are even numbered years. So like 2004, 2014, 2016, which are short sessions, and those are short years. The reason is that we do 2-year budgeting process. So the state will write the budget, which is a 2-year budget, in the long session. So this year during an odd number year, and that just takes longer. And so the cutoff calendar that I'm going to show you today is for this year, a long year. And so we can jump into that if you want to open that up, David, and we can just kind of walk through it.
So can I just jump in for 1 minute, Emily?
Yeah.
So the state legislature meets for a period of time called sessions, and that's the time where they're working on passing bills, getting them to the governor's desk so that they can become laws. And so this year they also have to work on the budget, which is why we've got this longer session this year in comparison to last year and in comparison to what will come next year.
Right. Exactly. Thank you for that reminder. So yeah, even taking a step back, so the legislature does not go year round, right? It's only for a short period of time. So it's 105 days during the long sessions. Although, of course, there's the caveat that oftentimes during the long sessions, especially, the legislature will go into what's called special session, otherwise known as overtime. So it's like if you think about like a basketball or football game, right? You play the full amount of time, but then if there's a tie, right, you go into some sort of overtime or special session. And so for the last few years, actually, I think ever since I've been a lobbyist, during those long years where there's a budget year and there's a divided government, right? So the House is controlled by Democrats, the Senate's controlled by Republicans. You try to figure out a $40 billion biennial 2-year budget, and they just are not agreeing on much, which is why they go into overtime. So we're going to bring up, and then once the session is over, special session included, then that period of time in the summer and into the fall is called interim. So it's the time when we're not in legislative session. Legislators go back to their districts. Lobbyists get a little bit of a break. And then primarily folks are worried about campaigns. So a lot of the focus of the legislators is getting reelected. So they're back in district campaigning and doing all that political stuff during the summer and fall when we're not in session. So let's jump into the legislative cutoff calendar, because I think this is a helpful tool. So can you click on the PDF one that has each of the days? Yes. So can you guys see this okay?
It's pretty small.
Is it? Okay, let's see if we can make it bigger. Is that helpful? Can you see that okay?
It's better. Can you guys see that in the back? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So this is what's called the cutoff calendar. And so you can see there's the 3 columns, where it says date, that's the actual date, right? Like, so January 9th. And then the middle is the day of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then the far column to the right is the day of session. So the legislative session begins, regardless of long or short session, on the 2nd Monday in January, right? So the session began, day 1 of session, on January 9th of this year, okay? So there is in a long session, I think there's about 3 weeks or so of when they have policy committees. So from that first day of session all the way down, if you scroll down a little bit farther, there it is. On that 40th day of session, right there, you see in the far right column, it says 40. The 40th day of session is the policy committee cutoff, okay? So for a bill like breakfast after the bell, once it gets introduced, meaning it's a bill, the legislator who prime sponsors the bill, who's the champion of the issue, gets co-sponsors, right? And they can introduce that bill any point between that first day of session, and you can actually introduce it before, it's called pre-filing, but from that first day of session all the way through the 40th day of session, they can introduce that bill. And that first major deadline is the policy committee cutoff. What does that mean? It means that the bill has to have a hearing and be moved out. And the fancy word we use for that is exec, otherwise known as executive session, voted out of the policy committee by that 40th day of session. So for a bill like breakfast after the bell, right, it could be introduced on the first day of session, it could be introduced on the second week of session, but it has to get a hearing and it has to be voted out by a majority of the committee members. I think it's on the education committee, by that policy committee cutoff. So all of the lobbyists really focus on getting their bills through that policy cutoff by the 40th day of session. Usually the way it works is committee chairs, right? So like the education chair will schedule a bunch of hearings for those first 2 or 3 weeks. So it's just tons of hearings. And then once the majority of those bills are heard, then they'll move to just a bunch of executive sessions where they just vote out those bills one after another. If a bill doesn't have enough votes to move out of committee because it's contentious or it's controversial for whatever reason, or it's highly political, then the bill often won't move out of that policy committee, effectively making it dead. So that's the first big hurdle, is the policy committee cutoff. Does that make sense? Any questions about that?
Any questions about this policy committee cutoff?
No? Okay, we'll just keep going through this. So let's say your bill, you get a hearing in policy committee and then it gets voted out of the policy committee by that 40th day of session. It could even get voted out, on the 30th day, in which case, good work, you're ahead of the game. The next big cutoff is called fiscal committee cutoff, which is basically the money committee. So you have the policy committee, which deals with what is this bill about? What changes does it make? And then the fiscal committee, which is how much does it cost? What is the monetary impact to the state? Okay. So as you can see, there's a ton of time. There's 40 days to get the bill through the policy committee, but there's only a week later that it has to move through the fiscal committee. In the House, they call it the Appropriations Committee or the Finance Committee. Those are two different committees. And then in the Senate, they combine those into one, and it's called Ways and Means. Why they call the things different committees in each chamber is beyond me. I would totally lobby for the committees all to have the same name in both chambers because it's simpler, but that's for another day. So let's say your breakfast after the bell bill makes it out of the education committee, the policy committee on like the 35th day of session. Congratulations, you've made it through the policy committee. The next step is you got to get that bill heard, same process, heard in the appropriations committee. If it has a cost to the state that's bigger than $50,000, which a lot of bills do, you have to have a hearing in the appropriations committee and then get it exec'd out, just like you did in the policy committee, by the 47th day of session, okay? Again, the fiscal committee is also a place where a lot of bills die because, as you can see, it's like a funnel, and there's just a ton of bills that come out of policy that won't make it through the fiscal committee, either because they're too expensive, they're too contentious, or quite honestly, sometimes they just run out of time. So let's say your bill gets heard in the fiscal committee, has a good hearing, maybe there's some amendments. I should say at both of these processes, the bill can be amended, right? So let's say, you know, one of the hangups with the breakfast after the bell bill might be that it would cost too much for the local school districts, right? They don't want to have to be mandated to provide breakfast for the students. I'm just kind of making this up, right? So maybe let's say there's a number of people in either the policy or the fiscal committee that says, we like this idea, but we're just afraid it's going to cost too much. So let's amend the bill. Let's change the bill so that only those districts that have, you know, at least 80% of students on free and reduced lunch. So really only those very low income school districts have to do this. But let's say the rest of them that are not 80% or more of free and reduced lunch students, they don't have to do it, right? I'm just using that as an example. If that's what it would take to move the bill along, and the stakeholders are like, oh, we don't love that, but we'll do it because it's what keeps the bill moving, it could be amended to that degree, either in the policy committee or the fiscal committee. The amendment will be voted on, and then the bill will sort of morph based on that amendment, okay? So let's say you get a hearing in fiscal committee, you get this amendment on it, and then it gets voted out or exec'd out of fiscal committee. Awesome, okay? That means that you're farther along than most bills, right? Considering that 1 out of 7 bills actually becomes law. If you're getting that far, you're ahead of the game. So then there's, after fiscal committee cutoff, there's House of Origin cutoff. What does that mean? House of Origin just means House bills have to make it through the House, so all the way to the House floor to get voted on by the 98, the full members of the House, the 98 full representatives of the House. If it's in the Senate, it means it has to make it all the way to the Senate floor and get voted on by the full Senate, those 49 senators. So House of Origin just means if it's a House bill, it has to make it through the House, Senate bill has to make it through the Senate. What this doesn't show is that there's one step in between the fiscal committee and the House of Origin, and that's called the Rules Committee. And this is just just to call it what it is, the Rules Committee is kind of bizarre. So it only meets on an ad hoc basis, meaning they pull together meetings when they deem appropriate. And all of these bills that make it through the different committees, so that the education bills that make it through education, through fiscal, the environmental bills that make it through environment and through the appropriations committee, right? All of these bills that make it through these different policy and fiscal committees then land in this gigantic swimming pool of the Rules Committee. Sometimes I think about it as like a water park, and you have all these different water slides that then funnel out into this pool called the Rules Committee, right? So kaplunk, you're in the Rules Committee. I'm going to sort of make this simpler than it is, but basically the rules members get what are called pulls. So they get to pull out on any rules meeting between, let's say, 1 to 3 bills of like probably at least 100 bills. They say, I like this bill and I like this bill and I like this bill. And it's only when a rules committee member pulls a bill from rules that it's eligible to go to the House floor, okay? So part of what you do as a lobbyist is maybe the person who is your biggest champion for breakfast after the bell isn't on the rules committee. Then what you have to do is look at a list of who are those legislators on the rules committee and really lobby them and really work them to pull your bill, because they're being lobbied by a dozen other people to pull this bill and that bill, and they only get so many pulls, right? So you got to get your bill pulled out of rules to be able to go to the House floor to get voted on, okay? So that is also a place where bills die, is in the rules committee. The other caveat is that if a bill is deemed controversial and the majority party doesn't like a bill, they can basically put their foot on it and say, this is not coming out of rules, right? So we see this sometimes. I actually have a bill that's stuck in rules right now that one of the majority parties doesn't like. And so we're having a hard time getting the bill out of rules onto the House calendar, which is where you go for the House of Origin cutoff. So we are at March, what's today? Today is Thursday, March 2nd, right? So you can see us, David, if you wouldn't mind highlighting that 53rd day, right? That's where we're at right now. So bills that have made it thus far have about the next, a little less than a week to make it through rules and then be brought to the House floor. Once a bill is pulled from rules, it has to go on this long list that then they consider and they take bill by bill to get voted on the House floor. So let's go down to House of Origin cutoff. Your bill gets pulled from rules. It makes it to what's called the order of considerations, which is the House calendar. It goes to the floor. It gets voted on. You have a majority of members, let's say 53 members vote on it. Congratulations, you've passed the House of Origin cutoff. Now what? The whole process starts over again from the beginning in the opposite house. Oops, Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
So if your bill makes it all the way through the House, then what it has to do is it goes back to the beginning, but it does the whole process over in the Senate. So as you can see, it's a really difficult process to pass a bill. So it says policy. So if we move on down, policy committee cutoff opposite House, right? So that just means if your bill was a House bill and you pass the House, then you go to the Senate, okay? That's what opposite House means. Same thing, fiscal committee cutoff. You have another week, opposite House, it's in the Senate. Opposite House cutoff, which just means it has to get to the Senate floor by that date. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, last day allowed for regular session, right? So that's the very end of session. The only caveat, or I shouldn't say the only, but the one caveat of where you don't have to start the process all over again to go to the opposite House is if you have what's called a companion bill. And so let's pull up your bills right now and I can kind of show you this. If you have both a bill that are identical that you have in the House and the Senate, and they both make it through their respective houses of origin, then you don't have to flip them and go back through because you've passed the policy in both the House and the Senate concurrently, right? Mm-hmm. So they can meet at the end with the same language. If one has been amended and is slightly different, okay, then they'll do concurrence at the end where they get together and they say, all right, we'll take this one instead of this one. We like the policy a little bit better there. So oftentimes you'll see bills will have companion bills because it just gives you a better shot of moving a bill through. If a House bill dies, let's say, and you have a companion bill, you still have the Senate bill that you can swing around from the Senate floor back up to the House, right? So you get more options. I know we're getting kind of short on time, so let's, I just want to pull up your bills real quick. So give me one of your bill numbers.
Breakfast after the bell is 1508.
1508.
And that's the one that's most popular.
Okay, great. So just to show you, 1508. Cool. So this one, can you see the? Hold on one second. Yep. So here's your bill, right? Can you see that 1508?
Yes.
So if there was a companion bill, David, would you put your cursor just above the comment on this bill part where the companion bill would be? So there would be a little hyperlink right in that area that would have the Senate bill number, which would say SB for Senate bill instead of HB, right? And they link those two together. This Breakfast After the Bell bill only has a House bill, which means this bill has to go through the Senate. So there's no companion to this, which makes it tricky. Then you can see, so one interesting thing, and they've done this year is the first year. See where it says comment on this bill in that box that's highlighted?
Mm-hmm.
So right next to that, it says get email notification. If you want, you can click on that and enter your email address. And I do this for my bills. And you can get an email sent to you anytime the bill status changes. So if it makes it out of committee, then it will send an email saying this bill got voted out of the policy committee or this bill got pulled from rules, which is a really nice feature to have. Just a couple things I want to show you. So in this box, it says first substitute SHB, which means substitute House bill. It's been introduced, it's in committee, and it made it to the on the floor calendar, which is great. So if you keep scrolling through bill history, it gives you the history, and you can measure this back up against that cutoff calendar that we looked at. So it's gone through the committee, it looks like it's been amended, it went through appropriations, and it got referred to rules, and then it got pulled from rules, and we know that because it says on February 28th, placed on second reading by Rules Committee, which is a fancy way of saying it's eligible to be voted on by the House floor. Two things I want to flag for you, and then I swear I'll shut up. These available documents are really important. So if you go to, there's the bill documents, original and substitute bill, you don't have to click on it. That will give you the bill language. It's just really technical and can be very hard to understand. What I often read is the bill reports. That gives you a summary. So the reason that there's 3 of them is that they'll do a summary of the original bill, and then they'll do the summaries House bill report for each of the substitute bill. So if you click on that last House bill report, David, I just want to bring this up. This explains what the bill does and the changes to it in really straightforward terms, or at least more straightforward than reading the bill itself. So see in that box, it says brief summary of amended bill, right? It says requires qualifying high needs schools, beginning when it does, to offer breakfast after the bell, specifies that period of time designated for student participation, right? This explains what the changes are in really straightforward language. And if you keep scrolling down, it will give you a history of the issue as well. It will tell you who testified on it. So if you keep scrolling, right, it says background child nutrition program. It will just explain to you what currently is law, what are interesting pieces about this, state support for school breakfast. And keep scrolling. And then it says summary of a bill is amended. So that will tell you exactly what the changes that were made to the bill in really straightforward terms. And if you keep scrolling down, what's also interesting is it will say at some point on here, keep going down. This is a fairly long one. There it is. So staff summary of public testimony. This will tell you what the summary of the testimony was. So those people that made their opinions known about the bill, they'll summarize here. And if you keep scrolling down a little bit more, oftentimes, see right there, scroll back up, it will actually tell you in support. So it tells you that Representative Stonier, who's the prime sponsor, testified. It tells you that some guy named Michael Steffen, who is the Washington State PTA person, testified. Tell you somebody from the Office of Superintendent, United Way, right? So that'll give you an idea of what are the different interest groups that are supporting it and who's opposed. Last but not least, if we go back to the bill page, if you haven't already done this, the homework I want you to do this week is if you go down a little bit more, see where it says available videos. Did you guys get a chance to watch any of the videos?
No, we have not.
So this is really good way to understand the bill better, is if you go to the House Education on February 2nd, then you can actually watch the hearing. You can watch the legislator who testified, you can watch the staff presentation, and you can also hear the different questions that legislators will ask. And actually, a lot of the legislators might have the same questions that you do. What does it do? What are the implications? So my homework for you for this week is to watch the hearing in the policy committee on this bill.
You'll have to scroll through and look for that.
Yeah. Yes, you'll have to scroll through to make sure you find which bill number it is, because there'll be probably a lot of hearings. Okay, now I've talked at you for a long time, but I wanted to give you that kind of tutorial because there's some really awesome resources, and the Washington State Legislature, I think, has one of the best websites to help you navigate what those resources are and track a bill. Questions, comments, tell me things.
Hard time.
Any questions anybody has?
Questions, comments for her?
Probably don't have sisters talking the entire
Do you
time.
have one? You guys wrote them down on your piece of paper from last week on Tuesday?
That's nothing, right? So we did.
Alex, do you have any questions from yours?
All I want to know is.
Huh?
Didn't write down questions. We were just writing down arguments.
Talking about clean water?
We're talking about.
Nobody was listening. Yeah, I was talking the entire time.
You guys, can you turn the lights on? It's really hard to see you.
Oh, yeah, we can see the,
The screen, right.
screen, yeah. Let's turn one of them, there we go, that's right. Can you see us now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
Okay,
let you know, we have about 2 minutes too, so.
2 minutes, any questions? So,
Let's ask questions.
our bill is, well, the breakfast after the bell bill has just been pulled from the rules committee, so it's still moving forward, correct?
Yeah,
So we need to look at the other bill that there's a lot of interest in is the bill about
The lead pipes.
yeah.
pipes in the water system. So we're gonna look at that, and we're gonna see what point it's at in the process, and we'll do that when we're finished with our video chat. So are there other things that we should be doing between now and our next meeting?
Yeah, so what I would say is any of the bills that you're interested in, go to the legislative webpage. Can you pull that back up, David? The bill, yeah. So the two things I want you to do with any of the bills that you're interested in is to type the bill number into the top. So what's the lead pipe bill right there?
We have the paper.
Huh?
We don't have the paper on hand right now.
Does anyone have the packet for the lead pipes
No.
for the bill?
Why are you asking?
Oh,
Because we have it.
I got it. 1805.
1805. 1508 and 1805. Perfect. So this is also just a sole bill. So what I want you guys to do for whatever bills you're interested in is I want you guys to do a thorough analysis, okay? So put in the bill number, okay? And then go down through the document or scroll down, figure out where it is in the process, figure out if it's still alive, which you can know from that timeline that we talked about. And I will email that timeline to you, Megan, so you have it. I
Okay.
want you to read the House Bill analysis. So if you can highlight that, David, in that corner, that's the House Bill analysis. So you get an understanding of what it does. If you want to read the actual bill text, you're welcome to. But I'm telling you, even as a lobbyist, I usually just read the summary because that's what gives you an idea of what it does. And then I want you to watch the video. If there's been a hearing, which you see available video right there, I want you to watch the testimony to see which organizations are supportive, which aren't, what are some of the questions being asked, okay? Does that sound good?
Yes.
And so then you guys are going to be the experts on the bill. You're going to know, where it's at in the process. Is it still alive or dead? What are the arguments? And then if you have time, maybe in small groups, think about if this bill died, right? What could have been done maybe to keep it alive? If you hear some pretty big opposition, or if you don't hear opposition, but you can imagine there's opposition, what changes could have been made to the bill maybe to keep it going, to keep it alive? Okay?
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Great. Sounds
Awesome.
perfect.
And breakfast after the bill is a great bill. It may very well come to the House floor in the next couple of days. And remember, it has to come to the House floor by Wednesday to still be alive. So if you want to click that get email notifications, you can actually see if the bill gets referred to the House floor, which is a fun game to play to see when your bill is moving. So I'm getting the signal. We got to go. Thank you guys for your hard work. You've got your homework cut out for you this week, and I'm really excited to get a report back on how your bills are doing next week.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
Bye.